Governor Polis basically said to us, the newly elected legislators, was, I'm not going to help President Trump do mass deportations. But of course we want criminals deported. And that second part was the key phrase, because you're saying you want the criminal illegal migrants deported. Okay, well, we need to change the state law in order for those probation and parole officers to turn over that information to the federal authorities. So we'll see if he puts his money where his mouth is and see if he actually wants the criminal migrants deported.
Let's get a newbie's take on the state legislature. But first, subscribe and like our channel. Click on that little bell icon, get our notifications, and please find the podcast of this show on your favorite listening app. Jarvis Caldwell, you're a brand new state representative. Just how stupid are you?
You know, my wife asks me that awful lot. Fortunately, I have a couple of years of experience up there at the Capitol. I was the communications director for the House Republicans in 2023. Before that, I was in aid for one of the legislators. So I kind of know what I'm going into. Some of the House Republicans joke that I'm kind of going into my second term because I have 2 years experience there. I know what I'm getting myself into. I know how brutal it can be, especially kind of in those later days towards the end of session.
So you actually knew not
Yes.
only what a pain in the ass this job is, you also knew how ineffective Republicans are at large because they are nearly a super minority, and you ran anyway. So what's your problem, man?
Yeah, I know. I think about that sometimes, but the reality is I feel like I have the ability to do something and influence some change there. And
I was young ones too. I remember that.
Well, that's
the
what
reason I ran.
That's
I
right.
remember that.
That's what I'm trying to do now, right? So this election cycle, we actually flipped 3 state, House seats, which is a nice change from the last 10 years or so. And so I'm hoping to build on that momentum, hoping to bring a reasonable, grown-up voice to the legislature and slowly start working that back. And maybe 2 years from now, we win back 3 seats or 4 seats and at least get back to balance. I don't see us in the majority for quite a while. That's just the reality of things. Once you lose it, it's really hard to get it back. But it's going to take time.
I don't see you in the majority for a long while because of the demographics of the state, the redistricting that's happened in the state, and quite frankly, Trump. I have a hard time seeing suburban areas vote Republican while Trump is in office here in Colorado. Other states, that's fine. And I'm only talking about suburban districts. Yours seems to be a bit of an anomaly. That's been a hardcore Republican district for a long time, north of Colorado Springs.
Yes, yeah, it's actually, I've been told it's the second most Republican district in the entire state of Colorado. As far as I'm aware, it's never been held by a Democrat. So it's what you would call a safe seat in the legislature. But I think people are finally getting fed up, and I think that's what we saw this last election. Whether you like President Trump or not, I personally do, but I think people are just fed up with what's going on within their own state, which is why we're seeing the ballot initiative that we're seeing, and we're starting to see some seats come back. One of the points that I always made in 2023, we kept hearing, well, the Democrats have this mandate, right? They have a mandate because they have a supermajority in the state house. So what I did was I added up every single vote for a House Republican, win or lose, in 2022. And when you actually run the numbers on it, a House Republican, win or lose, got around 47% of the total vote in the state of Colorado. So while I know some people want to give up on the state of Colorado and say it's a lost cause, I just don't believe it. I think a statewide seat is still something that we can do.
I did exactly the same thing for this last election, and I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I think it was less than 46%. But there's no question that there's a strong feeling that we want Republicans too. That's, call it 40%, call it 45% of the state would vote Republican. That doesn't mean they are Republican. A lot of them are unaffiliated. Let's talk about the dysfunction inside your machinery now. So Hugh McKean, the late great minority leader, hired you. We miss him quite a bit. He was just a great force of nature and actually a really good guy.
Yeah.
So you saw a lot of what's going on. You saw the dynamics between the two extremes of the Colorado GOP.
Right.
I'll put it in a couple ways. The people who want to win and the people who want to be right. And I'm even not sure that the people who want to be right even want to be right. I think they just want power at this point. You went through a nasty primary. You won that easily. And the party endorsed your opponent. I think almost every candidate that the party endorsed lost. I'm trying to remember. It was like
it was
17 of them or something.
14 out of 18.
Yeah.
Me being one of those 14.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about how out of step the party is. That echoes inside the legislature as well. So not only do you have a near super minority, so it's a minority of Republicans, there's been fractures among that group itself, even in the House. Some are, acolytes of Dave Williams. Others are like, no, this is crazy. We're doing our own thing. You've seen it up close and personal. How do you make it work?
Yeah, so
that might be a question for Rose too, the minority leader.
So the thing is when you're there as a caucus and you're doing those late nights, those battles, and I know we like to focus on the dysfunction at the state level and the emails that get put out and things like that, and them involving themselves in primaries and all that, which I've been very critical of.
And weird lawsuits now too,
right.
Which I mean might be great lawsuits, but the job of the party is not to do lawsuits on local districts.
Right.
The job of the party is to raise money for Republican candidates and get them to win.
Right. So, but when we're actually working together as a caucus, whether you're a big fan of Dave Williams or you're not, when we're actually working on behalf of the people, we actually really come together behind closed doors.
What politician BS crap am I hearing from you? Come on.
But we do, because, think about all the gun control fights or the abortion battles and things like that. We're all on the same page, whether you like state party leadership or county party leadership or not. Like, we're there to do a job on behalf of our constituents, and we come together to do that. That's been my experience there.
It's been my experience looking at it that a lot of the dysfunction from the party can, not always, spill over into the dynamics at the state house between Republicans. Let me give some credit to Rose Pugliese, your minority leader, who I think has done a remarkable job of trying to get past that and pull people together.
Yeah.
But during the heat of the moment, often that doesn't happen.
Yeah, from my experience, I wasn't there in the 2024 session when Rose became minority leader, but Rose is a good friend, and I can tell you that even public statements by some of the caucus members who maybe what you would classify as fall on the other side of the party have publicly praised the work that she's doing. Her and then Ty Winter as well, our assistant minority leader. Those guys, they listen, and that's the big thing. They listen and they go, okay, this is the strategy we're thinking. What strategy are you thinking? And usually when you're talking about actual caucus issues and you're battling stuff on the House floor or battling with the governor, the state party politics, the stuff that goes on there, you're not even really thinking about that. Like I don't, when I'm sitting here talking policy and stuff, I don't think, well, what is Dave Williams thinking? What is he going to put out? That's
what do you think happens in a couple months when it's time to elect a party chair? Does Dave Williams pull it off again? Because it is a self-selecting group that wants to be in the central committee. I wouldn't want to be in it.
Yeah, and I've been a part of it. I was an executive committee member, a bonus member on the county party, which gives you a vote at the state level. But that was during the time that Christy Burton Brown was the chair. But I don't know if Dave runs again for chair. I've been very critical of him publicly,
Why?
So the tweet, I guess you could call it, that went very viral a couple months ago was me saying, how sad is it that the governor of Colorado called me to congratulate me on winning the election when I've never heard anything from not only the state party leadership or the county party leadership as well. And that's for the June primary or the November election. And I know the governor's probably a very busy person, probably a lot busier than the county party chair, and they haven't even bothered to reach out. Now, I don't care. It's not about getting a pat on the back. It's not about being told thanks. But it's like, well, what the hell does the county party, what's their job if they're not reaching out to their elected members in the county party? There's not that many of us. And they don't have time to reach out and say, hey, congratulations, on top of months and months and months of them never reaching out to say, hey, how can we help? I didn't need their help. I did it without them. But at least do your job and reach out to your candidates.
So what I'm hearing, and tell me if I got this right, is that you represent this district. There's a party apparatus there that has no communication with you, the guy that they should be working with to get across the finish line, even though it's a safe district. And even after your victory, there's no communication, which is so bizarre that this is the easiest and best way for an elected official to connect with the people in his community that support him. And this is where they build a movement. You get nothing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's even worse than that when you really think about it, because it's one thing to just not reach out, but like in the primaries, both county party and state party were actively working against candidates. And I mean, sending out mailers on behalf of other candidates. I mean, I have some of them where Dave Williams is on one side of the flyer, you flip it over, very critical message of Jeff Crank, who ultimately ended up winning, and it's paid for by the Colorado Republican Party. I got a newspaper in the mail called The Trumpet that I'd never heard of, paid for by the Colorado Republican Party, and it was an actual newspaper, and it had advertisements in it like a newspaper would with all of the candidates that they personally preferred. Our county party, which it's not in their bylaws that they can help candidates like the state had changed their bylaws. The county party actually reached out to their preferred candidates, is what I call them, and had them bring in literature, used county party resources to make what you call them door hangers, drop baggies, and actually went around and targeted our districts and hung up flyers for their preferred candidates.
Your primary opponent?
Yes, and never once reached out to me. And I called out the county party chair and said, you know, what's going on here? And I went there and saw it myself. I found out what precincts they were going to be walking in my district. I went there and I saw the baggies hanging on the doors myself. And when I called out the county party leadership and said, like, what's the deal with this? You never reached out to me. Can you show me where you reached out to me to bring my material to make it fair? And I basically just got well, it's not my job to run your campaign.
But it's their job to help your opponent's campaign.
To help my opponent's campaign, exactly.
Which, and you know, for a century has never happened inside the Colorado GOP. I mean, the idea is we run primaries, we don't play in primaries, and we help the guy who wins win in November.
Yeah.
So that's gone.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear about something. Like whether I have a personality difference with you or not, you have a job to do. Do your job. I'm not asking for any special favors. I'm not saying, hey, give me some kind of leg up on this. That's the exact opposite of what I want. Just stay neutral in primaries, raise money year-round, 365, to help the Republican candidates in the general election against the Democrats. That's all I'm asking for, and that's all most of us are asking for. It's that simple. And one of the things that I said about Dave Williams, this was after the primary, before the general election, was, look, if a board of directors hired a CEO to run their company, and that CEO just went completely in a different direction, broke precedent, went all in, threw all the chips on the table, divided their organization in half, basically, and then they failed and they lost, they would either step down or they would be removed. And that hasn't happened.
Are you calling for Dave Williams to be removed?
Well, I think at this point, I really want to focus on the session. I don't really want to get involved in all of that right now.
So you've already got the politician dodge down. I like this.
So what I would like to see is when it come February or March, when the elections for state party leadership go up, I would like to see someone else. And I haven't been exactly shy about that. I would like to see somebody else run and get it. And I wouldn't like to see Dave run again. If he chooses to, that's his right. I just hope that the state central committee members kind of see all the nonsense that went on.
I get a sense he's angling for a federal job in the Trump administration somewhere.
Yeah, I kind of think that's been the play since the beginning, with the early endorsement of President Trump in the primaries, which I think we were the first state to do that. But, you know, maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't, I don't know.
Let's move from the dysfunction on the GOP side to the dysfunction on the Democrat side.
Yes.
I've said it before, I'll say it a million times. The story in Colorado, beyond the explosion of the regulatory state that gets no coverage, is this growing civil war amongst Democrats. And I get it. It's so much more fun to beat up Republicans. It's just easier target. You got a guy putting out, burn the gay pride flag. How do you just have to, I get it. I guess why the media does it, but, and I don't mean this to hurt your feelings. You got no power, dude. Jarvis, you got no power. The only power you might have is to stop a veto override. All right,
Right.
That makes you feel good. The other side really seems to be fighting, and it's brewing between socialists and progressives. I have no other way to put that. Right. That there were Democrats throughout Colorado history that were still pro-enterprise. They were pro-business. They were pro-owners' rights. They understood the farm community. Now, they might have been pro-union. They might have wanted more in benefits than less. But it's not like Dick Lamb or Roy Romer, who owned a company selling tractors.
Right.
That these guys were communists. These guys, they're socialists, and there's not a single part of Colorado life they don't want government hip deep in. You were there before. Is there a growing split amongst Democrats?
Yeah, and the Democrats, to their credit, I think for a large part, they're very good at kind of keeping it behind closed doors a lot of times.
It's because they have a press that helps them.
Right, and it definitely spills out though, and we definitely see it from time to time. Two of the members, Tim Hernandez and Elizabeth Epps, lost their primaries. They were two big parts of that civil war. There are other members who I'm sure will pick up that and run with it. But I watched your interview with Kyle Clark, and I appreciate that you pointed out, because this is something I pointed out when I was the communications director. There was all this focus from the local media on the infighting between the Republicans, and you're talking just a kind of small group of Republicans, a handful, less than a handful, that would have disagreements on maybe process sometimes in the legislature, but they put very little focus on the actual fighting between the Democrats, and they're actually the ones with power. And so I'd always kind of, when they would ask us questions, I would say, well, why are you focusing on that? Like, we're not the ones with power. You should be focusing on the Democrats. But I think it's something that we're going to see spill out maybe even more.
Did Kyle's
publicly.
answer satisfy you?
I mean, Kyle's answer was kind of, he was like, well, we do. If I remember correctly, it was kind of, well, we do, and that's a fair assessment, but I don't know. I kind of felt like he was riding the fence on that, but I think most people who watch it kind of go, it seems like you focus a lot on Republicans when we have very little power in the first place. And that was another struggle I did as communications director. I would pitch stories to the press at the Capitol, and I'd say, hey, look, the governor of Colorado said he wants to have a 0 state income tax, right? And we're not really much closer than when he came into office. Republicans are running a small cut of the state income tax, yet we can't get a Democrat sponsor. The governor won't come out and say whether he's for or against our bill to cut the state income tax. Why aren't you guys covering this? Like, if you guys actually covered this, maybe it would put some pressure on them to either give an answer or get on board with it. And so I'm going to continue doing that, pressuring the media. Why are you guys focused on this and not on that?
Am I hearing that your frustration is not only with your political opponents, but you feel that Colorado's media is helping them?
Well, and I try to
or not challenging them. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Sometimes I question the stories they focus on, I guess you could say would be the best way. I know most of the political reporters there, they've been very fair with me when I was a communications director. When they were covering a story, they would say, hey, this is what we're doing. We want to get your guys' side of it. I really worked hard to encourage our Republicans. Republicans naturally are hesitant to talk to the media a lot of times because they feel like they're going to go into an ambush and they're going to get that, that deer in the headlights look on camera or something like that. But I go, look, the local media, they've got to cover a story.
Stop there for a second.
Okay.
I find that fascinating. I know exactly what you're talking about, but I want you to dive in a bit. communications guy, House Republicans, and your team is reluctant to talk to reporters. That says a lot, because politicians by nature want to be in stories. They want to have their photograph in the paper. They want to be interviewed and shown on 9 News. They want these things because it is free advertising.
Right.
But the press here makes it so that you're telling me, I want to make sure I got this, that there's a real reluctance amongst Republicans to engage with the press.
Absolutely. And again, it comes back to when we think of media a lot of times, especially if you haven't dealt with the media, you think of MSNBC or CNN, like you're going on Rachel Maddow's show or something, right? And she has a whole team of people that stack all these questions against you and do research, and you're gonna get ambushed and you're gonna get caught off guard. They're gonna bring up a topic that they didn't tell you that they wanted to talk about. With local media, from my experience, to give them credit, it's not like that. They don't ambush you. It's, hey, you have a bill coming up. We want to talk to you about this bill. Okay, and then that's what we do. Now, there are certain bills that are a little more contentious that you may be a little hesitant because you go, okay, well, this is a very left-leaning media outlet. This is a bill that I know they hate. Do I really want to go on there and talk about it? I would say most of the Republicans now are comfortable with, I've got my talking points down. I can anticipate the questions. And that was my job as a comms director. I would go in and what we would call, when I was in the military, we'd call it murder boarding, for lack of better terms. But we go in there and then I hit you with a bunch of questions that I think a media person would ask. And I see what your answers are. And then I help you develop your response and go from there. And maybe this term works better than this term, or this phrasing, or just things like that. And so I think when you do that with politicians, they get more comfortable because they're not walking into it blind and getting caught off guard. So that's something I'll continue working on with the House Republicans.
What I'm hearing, though, is there's a sense amongst Republicans, love the press, good people, but I don't feel I'm going to get a fair shake.
Yeah, that can be the case. And it comes back to what you and Kyle talked about, which is topic selection, right? And it's like, I'm running a bill to lower the state income tax. They don't want to talk to me about that. I'm running a bill to ban biological men and women's sports.
Man, do they want to talk about that.
I've got 50 email requests to do interviews. And it's like, what, that it just kind of throws up your red flag and you go, okay, why do they want to talk about that but not this other thing? And so then that's where you get a little like, I don't know. I feel like the selection sometimes.
And there's also, I think, a little bit of the got you side of this, which is, wait a second. The governor said he wanted to lower taxes and get it to zero. Right. Here's an opportunity. I can't get an answer out of the governor. Right. You reporters, you could pressure him on this.
Exactly.
Make a stand on it, because he's not going to talk to me, but he'll talk to you guys.
Exactly.
You could say he was going to cut special interest tax breaks. Instead, he's multiplied them many folds to every one of his favorite constituency groups. Well, wait a second. Didn't you say that and do this? I mean, the stories, the topic selections are right there. If only they had some folks inside the media who didn't think the same way they all do. Right. And I get a sense they have no idea the bubble in which they live.
Yeah.
But that's not your job. So you see this divided Democratic Party. You're a newbie going in. I'm imagining you'd like to stoke that divide a little bit. How would you do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. As far as how you do it, I don't have a good answer off the top of my head on how you stoke them, other than just messaging, right? Highlighting it. Again, when I was comms director, if there was some tension going on between Elizabeth Epps and leadership or something, I might be over at the press table sitting there saying, are you guys watching this right here? Are you paying attention to this? Bringing it to their attention. But most of the time I didn't have to do that, because especially with somebody like Epps, they just put it out there in the open anyways. And so she made my job kind of easy. There are certain things, I can give you a great example.
I believe it was a real mistake for people to target Epps and Hernandez in the primary and get them out. From your point of view, they are the gift that keeps giving. Yeah. I know that Republicans have their Klingenschmidts all the time that the press just can't help but go nuts over. Well, the left has theirs, but we never seem to help them. Yeah. Let me give her some credit. Let me give Epps some credit. And I want to weigh into this as well. She brought a suit against her own leadership for violating open meetings, and she won. That was a heroic thing to do. It did not win her friends inside of the party. It won her friends who care about transparency. In reaction, they passed a law to allow them to excuse themselves from large swaths of the open meetings law. I've never seen anything like this. This is the biggest middle finger to Colorado citizens that I've seen perhaps ever. It's just, screw you guys, you can't watch what we're doing. The media can't watch what we're doing. We'll use secret electronic means to communicate that disappear. We'll have meetings that we won't tell you about until after the fact. And this is going way too far. Paul Lundeen, Rose Puglisi have said they will not use the new advantages this law allows them. So they won't be doing that. I'm assuming you're down with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm very pro more transparency. There was one
Which
thing,
is easier because you're in the minority and nothing you talk about is actually going to happen.
Yeah.
But on their side, well, of course, if we can decide what things we're going to pass privately, and then we don't have to have our arguments out in front of reporters. Yeah.
There was one thing that I recall that the way the law was before that I thought needed some kind of reform, which was basically if minimum two legislators had a conversation about policy, then it was part of open meetings law, and you had to keep minutes and notes. And it was so vague that, like, if I stopped in the hallway to talk to a colleague about something, technically that's a meeting that I would have to disclose and do minutes for or something. And you just can't operate like that if you're stopping in hallways talking to people and you have to have minutes and turn it over or whatever. So there were some things that I think maybe could use some reform, but
that'll all be taken care of when my law requiring all elected officials to carry body cams.
Okay,
that are open to the public.
Is that a state ballot initiative?
Well, it's going to be our top priority.
Okay, good. I want to go back to the question you asked about stoking the flames between the Democrats, and I can give you actually a really good example that just popped in my head. So one of the things that I did when I was the communications director, there was a bill, and I'm sure you remember this bill. It was a bill that would make it a felony to sexually expose yourself to a minor for the first time offense. Because prior to this bill in 2023, it was only a misdemeanor. A second time offense became a felony. So this was actually a Democrat-sponsored bill. The idea was to make it a felony the first time offense. You sexually expose yourself to a child in person, because if you texted it or something, then it was a felony, right? Because it was federal communications, it used airwaves or whatever. So it was a felony if you texted a picture, but if you did it in person, it was only a misdemeanor.
Which is why I prefer the personal touch. I'm old school and I flash people.
There you go. Well, now it's a felony, so just be more careful when you do it. So this bill, it passed committee, it came out onto the House floor, and the progressives, the very left progressives, hated this bill. And I was sitting there on the bench, communications director. I'm sitting there with my deputy communications director, and Leslie Herod gets up and she argues against this bill. And she said that this bill was an attack on drag shows. And my jaw almost hit the floor, because what she was subtly admitting to that she didn't realize, I think at the time, was at these drag shows, adults are sexually exposing themselves to children. And that was a concern for her, because it would now make it a felony to expose yourself. And so...
Actually, I don't think that happens in drag shows.
So when she said that, again, my jaw hit the floor. We clipped it. I told my deputy comms director, clip that, let's post it, let's send it to all the big conservative influencers, let's get it over to Fox News, everything, let's get it out there. And it did. And within about 2 hours, it was front page Fox News. By that time they ran the story, the House had actually voted on the bill, and more than half of the House Democrats voted against that bill. It would not have passed had the Republicans not supported the bill. And so the headline was something like, more than half of Colorado House Democrats vote against bill making it a felony to sexually expose yourself to child. It was a long title. But they used our post, they put it out there, it was front page. So if you want to know the effect of exposing some of the radical stuff they do, when that bill went through the Senate a couple weeks later, guess what the vote was? It was unanimous. Even the leftist Democrats in the state Senate voted in favor of that bill because they saw the backlash that the House Democrats got for voting against it, and they didn't want any part of that. So it's funny.
They also knew it was going to pass.
Yeah, that's probably
and if it's going to pass, I don't want this to be on that mailer when I run for re-election that I voted not to make this a felony.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but you see, sunlight's the best disinfectant. When they do crazy stuff, you highlight it. Hopefully the media picks it up and actually covers it. And then maybe you tame their craziness a little bit.
When Harad did that, and you said, save that clip, there was an audio clip, but there was also a video clip because the Colorado channel has cameras in the House and the Senate, and you can see them in real time, and you can go back and pull things up. It's really pretty, welcome to 2008. You can do those things. Colorado is one of 2 states that does not have video of committee hearings. I find this ridiculous. I remember my time on the RTD board. I think it was Channel 8 in Denver. It was like, hey, can we come in and broadcast these things live? And I was like, yes, you need to see just the kind of craziness that happens here. And the board voted overwhelmingly, no. We don't want you to see what's going on here.
Yeah.
It was just so obvious. I feel the same way with this. Why in the world can't I watch a committee hearing online? A lot of the committee hearings have Zoom testimony and Zoom members and officials coming in.
Right.
But you can't take those same cameras and just
record
stream
them.
it?
Yeah. I always found that weird too, because like you said, and I've testified on bills before, when you're sitting there in the room, they have huge TVs, they have cameras, like you said, it's like Zoom-like. There's a camera on the people at the table testifying. There's a camera, I believe, on the actual members sitting there. And it's like, why isn't that available online? Why can you only get the audio? It's annoying, especially as a communications guy. I would want to clip things.
Because it costs next to nothing to throw another switch and go, here's the audio, oh, click, camera on.
Exactly. They're already, I mean, like you said, they're live streaming it already. Like, why isn't it just being recorded and putting on there? I'll bring it up to the speaker and ask. I don't have a good reason of why it's not, but it should be.
I was at a committee hearing when the guy who runs the Colorado channel said, we've been asking for this for 6 years. I believe it was 6 years. 6 years. And the Speaker of the House acted like, this is the first I've ever heard of such a thing. Crazy.
I'll see what I can do on that, because I agree with you.
All right, looking forward.
Yeah.
What's going to be the issue?
Yeah.
In this new legislative session?
Yeah. So the big issue right now that we're all being told is the budget, right? And I want people to keep this in mind. So we keep hearing the governor says a $600 million budget deficit. Our JBC people are saying it's probably closer to $1.4 billion deficit. I want people to keep in mind, whether it's $600 million or if it's $1.4 billion deficit, it's a $1.4 billion deficit from the highest budget ever in the history of Colorado, right? So just keep that in mind. It's not a revenue problem. It's a priority problem, right? They've just spent like drunken sailors. We are now passing every single year. It's a record high budget, and now we finally had a slow year, and they're like, oh God, we've committed $42 billion, but now we only have $41 billion. What are we gonna do? And so now they're freaking out about what are we gonna cut? They've basically told us any bills with a fiscal note are dead on arrival, which, spending less money is a good thing. Yeah, and I agree. But the issue that I find is that when we need things like juvenile bed spaces, which is a whole issue we can get into, but we need more bed spaces for juvenile criminals. And we're being told, well, we don't have the money for it. And it's like, well, we have $41 billion. You just need to prioritize it and make that a part of the budget, because a budget is a reflection of your values, your commitments to your constituents. And so if public safety is not one of your priorities, then what the hell is? What is more important than that?
I always found it sad but understandable that the most important bit of business you guys do is called the long bill. It's the budget bill.
Right.
This sets the priorities. This says, here's what we value. Here's what our representatives value. And it gets no coverage because it's long and it's boring and it's long
It's very
and
complicated.
it's boring. And, we want to, outlaw, changing your name. Oh my God, this gets all, because it's simple and easy to understand.
Yeah.
If the legislature didn't always jack up the Tabor limit, they do that by taking large items out of the budget and put them into enterprises.
Right.
So that we just keep building and building and building. If we kept Tabor the way it was, we wouldn't have this situation. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't have a big hole one year because every year it would keep our spending down. But they have found ways, and thanks to our liberal courts, they're successful at it, mm-hmm. of always growing the budget and keeping things off budget. Here's a big picture issue. We believe in no taxation without representation. Mm-hmm. We hire you especially on the tax bills, and because when you do spending, we can get rid of you. Right. When Tabor started, the amount of money that went into the barrel that is the general fund, mm-hmm. compared to those that are enterprises, which aren't run by elected officials, it was 2/3 the budget was in the big bucket, 1/3 over here. Mm-hmm. Fast forward a quarter of a century later, those numbers have switched.
Right.
So 2/3 of Colorado's budget is now out of the hands of our elected officials. There is no taxation with representation. It's now taxation to the unrepresentative appointed people who are running 2/3 of our government.
Right.
This is this is a truly sizable problem that no one wants to address because they want to grow that amount.
Right.
Point two, if the legislature starts repealing these special tax credits for special groups, special constituencies, environmental group over here, kids group over there, big business group over there, there is no problem. We've done the research at Independence. We could lower taxes every year if only we got rid of these special interest tax breaks, which the governor said he was going to end, but instead grew.
Right.
What are you going to do with that?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Rand Paul. I don't know if you are, but he does something every December. He calls it Festivus. And what he does is he highlights wasteful spending of the federal government. Now, the federal government, I mean, their examples are like ridiculous. It's like studying the mating habits of butterflies in Moscow or something like that, right? I don't know if we have anything that ridiculous, but what our team is doing is putting together a list of wasteful spending. So that way when we say, hey, we want better school security, and they go, well, we don't have any money for that. Okay, well, why are we spending $30 million a year on the Office of Just Transition, which is absolutely a ridiculous bureaucracy that doesn't do anything, and the
transition?
Just transition.
Just transition.
Yeah,
it's
a grant from the state that the intention of it is when you have coal-related industries who are transitioning away from that, the grant is to help them retrain their employees into doing coding or something, right? That's the whole learn to code thing.
Coal miners
right.
are natural born software coders.
My dad is a Kentucky coal miner, and he doesn't even own a computer. So the idea that he would ever start being a coder is the most ridiculous thing in the world. But yeah, so this was created in 2019. It got allotted $30 million, wow. And only $2 million of that's been spent. And the money is sitting in an account, and it's accruing like 1% interest, but we have inflation at like 8, 9, 10% interest, or whatever the rate is now. So it's actually losing money. And not only that, I think it was this year or last year, they requested another $15 million for the Office of Just Transition when they had only spent $2 million of the $30 million they initially got. Like, what the hell are we doing here? And then you're gonna tell me that we don't have money to put armed guards in our elementary schools? Because we have armed guards in our high schools, we don't have them in our elementary schools. We don't have money for that, but we have money to give to some bureaucracy that does absolutely nothing and has just got our money sitting in an account, and it's actually depreciating because of inflation.
This will be the minority's party, the minority party's job to illustrate the waste that is going on.
Absolutely.
To say and force votes on, do we cut this in order to continue our education programs? our streets?
Right.
Will we do the core governmental functions? And they don't want to do that. And so that'll be the challenge. All right, let's wrap it up with this. What's going to be the big surprise with this legislative session? This is your chance to make that clip that is the "I told you so" clip.
Yeah. So I think the budget is absolutely top of the one, but we already talked about that. Immigration for me is going to be a major issue because we have President Trump coming into office, Operation Aurora, right? I think we are going to be in the headlines of the national news for a big part of the beginning of his presidency, and there's going to be a lot of focus on what we're doing as a state legislature, and whatever the hell Mike Johnson's doing if he's out there with the Highlands mommies.
The Highland mommies with their AR-15s alongside the cops barricading the state capitol. Yeah,
good luck with that. But so one of my first bills, what I'm going to do is the 2019 sanctuary state law. In that law, look, if I was king for a day, that law is gone. That's not the reality that we're facing right now.
What is that law, by the way? Before you tell me what you change, explain what that sanctuary state law is.
Basically just not letting local authorities work with our federal authorities. And then there were some other laws that came along a couple of years later that actually punished them. I mean, it was very punitive if they were found to be working with the federal authorities.
The state cannot work with federal authorities to target immigrants for deportation.
Yes. And so one of the bills that I'm going to do, and this bill's never been ran before, but I was working with John Fabricatori, who ran for Congress, retired ICE field agent, very smart guy, the smartest guy I know on this issue. And I said, let's look at the 2019 law and let's see what kind of change can we make within the law to make it a little bit better. And one of the things we found was that in that law, it says probation and parole officers cannot turn over personal information of convicted illegal migrants to federal authorities. Now, again, remember this. Why do you have a probation or parole officer? It's because you've been convicted of a crime. Now, right after the election, we had a bipartisan retreat, and Governor Polis came there to talk to us, and somebody asked him about Operation Aurora. And it was music to my ears when I heard the governor say this, because I knew I was working on this bill. But Governor Polis basically said to us, the newly elected legislators, was, I'm not going to help President Trump do mass deportations. But of course we want criminals deported. And that second part was the key phrase, because you're saying you want the criminal illegal migrants deported. Okay, well, we need to change the state law in order for those probation and parole officers to turn over that information to the federal authorities. So we'll see if he puts his money where his mouth is and see if he actually wants the criminal migrants deported. Call me skeptical.
It's such a simple idea. And I want to see that vote. I want to see the vote of people who say, no, convicted. And I think that's a big part of this. Convicted, not accused, convicted criminals. We're not going to help them get out of here. No, we're just going to use our money to keep them in jail here. And it's insane. Yeah. People who vote against that, I think, will have a hard time getting reelected.
Yes. And just one more caveat to that, to make it even easier for the Democrats to vote for it, it's convicted of a felony or a crime of moral turpitude, right? So we're not talking about deporting people because they jaywalked or they got
people
drunk.
who've actually watched the Kardashians regularly, something that sick.
Yeah, exactly. Somewhere along those lines. That would be the moral turpitude crime there. But the reason we added the moral turpitude language is because what we found is a lot of people get arrested for things that should be felonies, but they get pled down to misdemeanors. And then we're talking sexual assault and things like that. So the bill will say a felony or a crime of moral turpitude. So even if it's a misdemeanor, if it's something heinous, like a robbery that got pled down to a misdemeanor, that's moral turpitude. And so we can at least turn the information over to ICE agents or whoever. So
and to be clear, this only affects Irish immigrants.
That's right.
All right.
That's right. Yeah.
I think you'll be fine. Hey, good luck in your new adventure. I'm excited for you. I wish you the best, and hurry up and get a real job.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and thanks for having me.
Jarvis, thanks.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.